Hello everybody, and welcome to AnthroView. I'm Jameson Mokel, and today I'll be presenting the third video in our Critical Lens series, Anthropology for Tabletop Game Designers. And today I'm going to be talking about focus groups. Focus groups are a social science research method where a moderator gets a group of people together and starts a conversation between those people to collect data about their feelings and opinions and thoughts and all that good stuff. And I have some experience doing focus groups because my first real job as an anthropologist was conducting and researching focus groups with a community group in San Jose. So it's a method that when I started getting interested in game design and learning about playtesting, I immediately realized how applicable some of the skills I'd been picking up doing focus groups would be for designing games and getting the most out of playtests and all that stuff that a lot of game designers use to find out if their games are working and if their games are fun and if everything's kind of going the way it's meant to go. Getting a group of people together to play test a board game is basically the best way to learn about a game design and to make sure that it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. I really hope you enjoy this video and that it's informative, so let's get to it. Many of you might already know something about focus groups. You might have participated in one for market research or a clinical trial. For those less familiar, a focus group is a form of data collection where a facilitator or moderator leads a group of people through a discussion to learn about their beliefs, values, habits, and preferences. There are many ways to conduct focus groups, including ones with two-way mirrors and video recording, but that isn't really the kind of focus group you're likely to use in tabletop game design, although recording playtests can be a really helpful way to test prototypes in their later stages, as designer Matt Leacock has pointed out in numerous interviews. For the most part, though, a focus group for our terms is very similar to your usual playtesting style. You have a group of people play your prototype, and you keep track of how they play and the things they say about the game, and then afterwards you ask some questions about their experience. The difference really is how you should be collecting the data when you use this method. There are some key advantages to collecting responses in a group setting. For starters, the interactivity of focus groups means that you get to collect a lot of responses from a variety of people who each bring their own experiences, knowledge, and playstyle preferences to the table. This means you can get feedback about the prototype itself and see what testers say to each other during their in-game interactions, which tells you more about the player dynamics at the table, and therefore the experiences people are having while playing. You want to know what people think is fun about your design and what needs work, and one of the best ways to accomplish this is to observe as many people as you can testing your prototype. Getting a variety of opinions is extremely important, since everyone's tastes and interests will be different, and what one player likes will not necessarily be the same as another person's opinion. That's another reason why focus group research is a great process for getting a better sense of your game's audience. Are you getting more positive reactions from people who like Euro games, or people who like dice chuckers, or role-playing games? Knowing your target audience is always helpful as a designer. After all, as players, we all have preferences that guide our choices of what games to purchase and play. Of course, it can also be helpful to get feedback from the people who don't necessarily fall into the usual audience for your game. But that's just another strength of group testing. If you attend playtesting events, you will likely get players who don't often play the types of games you design, and this will give you access to a wide range of opinions you wouldn't get from your usual board gaming group. Moreover, this kind of research is a great way to develop new questions for future iterations of your game. For example, if there's a mechanic that testers say is not working as intended in your current prototype, you can ask specific questions about how they think it can be improved, and then use that feedback to help redesign the mechanic. Then, once you have a new iteration, you will know to ask questions about that mechanic in your next playtest, to see if your changes worked or if you still need to refine things more. Now, despite these advantages, there are some things you have to watch out for when you use focus group methods. The most obvious is that collecting data from a lot of sources at once is challenging. You want to keep track of what everyone says, and what's working well, and what needs to be adjusted in your prototype. To some extent, good note-taking for group research is something you'll have to take time to work on. After all, practice makes perfect, and as you do more observations and group research, you'll be able to take more detailed notes faster, and you'll learn what information is important to take note of. But there are a few techniques you can use when starting out to ease this transition. A good method for getting the most out of a playtest is to ask players to take their own notes during play, something fellow designers are likely already accustomed to, or to fill out a short questionnaire about your prototype. I've known a number of designers who use questionnaires, and it's a great way to get the most complete and thorough responses possible. This might seem like something you do later on in the design process, but it's fairly easy to put together a general template with some questions that will apply to a wide range of prototypes, and I'll share some suggestions for doing this at the end of the video. Another major difficulty is that, in many group research settings, there's sometimes a tendency for one or two people to dominate the conversation. This is a common occurrence in any group setting. Some of us are just naturally chattier than others and have a lot to say without much prompting. That can actually be really helpful in playtesting, since people having too much to say is usually better than people having nothing to say at all, but you also want to get as much data as you can from everyone at the table. After all, some people are more reserved or slow to respond, but this doesn't make their feedback any less valuable. Since you don't want to discourage the people with the most to say, a good way to address this is to pay attention to the less talkative testers and to ask them questions directly. This can help break the ice a bit, and prevents the wallflowers from feeling like they're cutting into the conversation while also giving them a chance to share their thoughts. A related problem is when you have someone who thinks that the playtest is a debate and wants everyone, including you, to agree with them. They have a strong opinion, they think they know what's best for your design or about games in general, and they want the group to validate it. To some degree, this is an unavoidable situation sometimes, and it can be tense or just annoying, but there are ways to prevent it from derailing your playtest. First off, you still want to treat that tester as an expert, as I talk about in my previous video on participant observation. Remember, you aren't trying to defend your design choices. You want to know what can be improved. Still, it can be counterproductive if one person is preventing the other testers from feeling comfortable providing their feedback. If you can, you want to encourage others to share their unfiltered opinions without shutting down your opinionated testers. After all, maybe they do know what they're talking about, but that doesn't mean their perspective is the only valid one. Acknowledge that you have noted their suggestions, but let them know that you want to get as many different opinions as possible, then ask other members of the group to share their feedback. So let's say you want to start running your playtest like a focus group. That's awesome. And in a lot of ways, it's going to be an easy transition because parts of the playtesting process are already pretty similar to social scientific group research. But you're still going to need to learn methods and techniques to get the most out of this approach. That's okay though, because I'm here to teach you about it. The first step, once you have a prototype to test of course, is to get a group of people together to play your game. Now you'll hear me say this throughout the series, that the best people to playtest with are game designers and people that you don't know very well, your weak ties acquaintances. So if you aren't already part of a design community, you should start to look for one. That being said, if this is your first time trying out the focus group approach, it's actually helpful to test with friends and family so you can practice these methods and get comfortable with teaching your prototype, taking notes on feedback and interactions, and so on. When social scientists prepare to facilitate a focus group, we have a research design. This includes an outline for how we're going to structure a group session, research questions that guide our project, lists of questions to ask the group, and things like that. As a designer, after you have a playtesting session planned, you'll want to make a list of the things you'll be looking for during your observations. Start with the big, broad questions you want to know about your designs. Does the system work as is? What do people enjoy and what would they change? And, most importantly, is it fun? These are some of the research questions that should guide all your designs. You also want to make a specific list of questions for your prototype, things you want to know about your current iteration. Maybe you just designed a new movement mechanic, or you want to know if people are using a certain character ability. These are focused questions about your design. Some of these questions might be answered by asking your playtesters directly, like if you want to know how they felt about a mechanic. Others you'll answer through observations of the group play session, such as if certain options or cards are being used. And those observations will often inform new questions. For example, if you designed a new card and no one plays it, you might ask people why they didn't use that card. Like much of tabletop gameplay, group research is all about the interactions between people. You can get individual opinions by playtesting a design with a single person, but what you should be focused on in a group test is how players do things in response to each other and the interesting dynamics that play out when their in-game actions result in player reactions or interesting counterplay. The reason to use focus groups for game design is that you want to know how people interact at the table and how your mechanics interface with the other design choices. So you want to see how players react to something like the effects of a card or the dice system you're using, but you can also take this opportunity to see how mechanics interact with each other. Group testing is especially great for revealing broken combinations of in-game choices. Maybe two cards played in sequence create an unstoppable victory for one player. Or on the other hand, maybe many choices simply cancel out what other players do. This was the case in one of my first designs, but I didn't realize it until one of my informants played my prototype to a stalemate with his opponent. Seeing new people play my game highlighted something none of my previous tests did, that some of my base mechanics were not lending themselves to satisfying player interactions or in-game choices. So be sure to make notes on how players respond to things in the game and if something seems imbalanced in terms of the game system. One of the techniques that social scientists use when conducting focus groups is creating a visual representation of people's responses and reactions that everyone involved can see, which helps build a more complete picture of people's thoughts and opinions. Now, since time is always at a premium when running a playtest, you won't be able to use this approach with the same depth as an anthropological focus group. I know that from experience. But you can use a smaller scale version of this approach with a felt pen and a large sheet of paper or some note cards. When you're asking for playtester reactions, you can write down a few keywords and display them on the table and ask people to elaborate or expand on them. Let's say someone tells you a mechanic is confusing. Using this method, you might make a confusion card and another card with the mechanic that was confusing and place them together on the table. If another player brings up something they thought was confusing, add another card. At the end of your playtest, you can just take a picture of these cards, or you can keep them together and you'll have a convenient way to keep track of things that came up in your playtests. If you test your prototype multiple times in a day, you can even add to these lists and create an even more extensive record of feedback. This creates an easy-to-use reminder for you, as well as providing a good visual prompt for testers giving you feedback. Another thing you want to keep in mind is that playtesting is about more than just the actual play of the game. It helps you to understand people's impressions and reactions to the play experience. If it's possible, you want to get your testers to stick around for a bit after testing to answer some questions and give you feedback. Make sure to take advantage of the time following any playtesting session to debrief with your playtesters. Check in with them, ask questions that you thought of during the session, and take the time to get direct answers about their impressions. It might be a good idea to tell players before you start testing that you'd appreciate them staying after the playtest to answer some questions, as it can encourage them to make some mental notes while playing. Let them know that, if they're willing, you'd like to get their post-game thoughts so you can get a fuller picture of their experience. You won't be able to get all this information while they're busy playing your prototype after all, and you want to gather as much data as you can for improving your next iteration. Now, if someone says they have time to play, but not to debrief, That's fine. You still want them to participate and you can get valuable data from them, but having people play your prototype then answer questions afterwards is one of your best sources of information about your designs. If you're using a questionnaire, this can be the time to have them fill that out as well, but you will likely also have questions you want to ask that you didn't have prepared ahead of time, ones that came up during play. Of course, you don't want to overextend your goodwill by trying to take too much of people's time, but it's generally acceptable in playtesting to make some time after playing a prototype to debrief in this way, and the insights you can get from this can be some of the most valuable and informative things people say. After all, this gives you a sense of their overall impressions, which is a great way to determine if they thought your design was fun, functional, and unique, which are the qualities you want to achieve. Now, conducting a good focus group requires some skills that take time to develop, as well as a good sense of the information you're looking to collect. You want to know if your prototype is working as intended, what is good and what needs adjustments, and if the game is fun overall. As far as skills go, you'll want to practice note-taking, especially to keep track of the things people tell you in an organized way that you'll be able to refer back to later, and you'll want to maintain objective distance, not taking anything personal if someone doesn't like part of your design or thinks they have all the right answers for how to fix it. It also helps to be good at teaching games, since in many cases you'll be explaining your prototype and helping testers play. Some of these skills you will develop over time, but there are a few helpful tips that you can use to improve your experience even during early group playtesting. First off, you want to make sure everyone is sharing their thoughts. Some people are naturally more inclined to speak up about something they like or dislike. Others need a bit of prompting. If someone at the table is not saying much, it isn't necessarily because they don't have anything to say. Pay attention to the quieter folks and ask them directly to tell you what they think. This will facilitate a more dynamic discussion, and they might have some great insights that give you new, valuable information about your design. Remember, the key reason to do group-style research is to get as many opinions and ideas as possible from a wide range of testers. Take advantage of the opportunity to hear what everyone has to say about your game. Also, even if you're audio or video recording the playtesting session, you want to take notes that you can refer back to while you are asking the group questions about the prototype after playing. Things often come up in a playtest that you could not have anticipated, and you'll want to ask questions directly related to those issues. If you're relying completely on a recording, you won't be able to refer back to things people said while you were at the table with a given group, so do yourself a favor and make notes you can use during and after any group testing. Finally, when you're formulating questions to ask after a play session, you want to try and focus on open-ended questions that give participants room to respond and to answer in their own words. This is generally good advice for any social science research that's trying to find out about people's feelings, opinions, and tastes. So if you want to know if they thought the game was fun or if a particular mechanic was working, you don't necessarily want to flat out ask, "Was the game fun?" or "Did you like the trading mechanics?" because people don't always have a solid answer for that. Instead, ask what they enjoyed, what they didn't enjoy, what stood out to them, and so forth. If you're interested in their reactions to particular mechanics, try to get more open answers by asking questions like, "What did you think of the trading mechanic?" or "How would you change the way you trade resources in the game?" This will give you ideas for new iterations of your design based on their answers, as well as providing more valuable information than binary good or bad, like or dislike responses, because you'll elicit more nuanced feedback that gets to the heart of what people are feeling while they play. If you're going to create a quick questionnaire for use during testing, you'll probably want to include some questions that are specific to your design, but you can also start with some broader questions that can be applied to any prototype. If you haven't done this kind of data collection before, here are some examples that you could include in your questionnaire or revise to fit your needs. What was your favorite part of the game? What was your favorite mechanic or interaction? What was your least favorite mechanic or interaction? Did any of the rules confuse you? What suggestions would you make to improve the game? These are just a few possible questions to help get you started. Feel free to use them in any way you want, or just as inspiration to create your own. Focus groups can help you learn all kinds of interesting things about any topic, and the overall format is already so similar to playtesting that these methods should be able to help improve your game designs with minimal effort. Just remember that tabletop games and focus groups are all about the participants, how they react to things, and how they interact with each other. You're just there to facilitate their experience and to record what you observe. Whether people love or hate your design, you can still get great information from group testing that you can't get any other way. So give these techniques a shot, and as always, if you have any questions, get involved in the comments below. Next time, I'll be covering the importance of being part of a game design community, and how interacting with your fellow designers helps you to design better games. So I hope you'll join me for that. Until then, may knowledge guide you. Thanks for watching.